Professor Dr. Cees Hamelink from the University of Amsterdam. He's got a background in psychotherapy, so if anyone needs any assistance, he's offered to help. Okay, so any questions, you can approach him later. Okay. Professor Hamelink has published 18 books, okay, which is really impressive, and he's going to be talking about one of them today, the ethics of cyberspace. He also works for the United Nations, and he's an advisor to for Kofi Annan, and he's also a jazz musician. So, welcome.
You. Whenever you have to speak in public, it's a wise idea to consult the stars. So whenever I speak, I always look at the astrological column in the newspaper, seeing what my stars tell me. And this morning, the stars told me that today, you have no idea what you're going to do. And the important thing is that no one should notice. So I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I'll do my best to cover it up. It begins easy, as most things in life begin easy. Increasingly, human communication takes place in cyberspace, so it should make sense to wonder whether our behavior in cyberspace is legal or illegal, whether it is sane or insane, whether it is moral or immoral. Now, what we want as academics, we want to have evidence-based rules to make a judgment. Is something legal or illegal? There we have no problem. The law will tell us. The law will tell us that our behavior is legal or illegal. With sane and insane, we have no problem. Just ask your psychiatrist, and he or she will tell you whether you are sane or insane, based on long studies and evidence-based. But now we get to a real problem. Who's going to tell us whether our behavior is moral or immoral? The great problem with ethics is that contrary to the law and sanity, we have no evidence-based rules. No one can tell us. We can probably only tell ourselves. And in order to find a solution to that problem, we invented a trick. We decided as human beings that we would agree on certain ideas that seemed to us to be good ideas. And the two ideas that today most of humanity has agreed to is that it's good to lessen the suffering of human beings, to make human suffering less, not more. And it's a good idea to treat human beings with dignity and not to humiliate them. Now, these two commitments could be called a commitment to humaneness and a commitment to humanity. And we seem to be doing rather well because those two commitments have found expression in what today we would call international human rights law. And international human rights give us a certain guidance. If we follow its rules, then we probably behave in a moral way. And if we violate their rules, we behave in an immoral way. And we're doing well because today we realize that human rights worldwide are more respected than ever before. It's a relatively recent phenomenon, but as from the 70s, 80s of last century, we're not doing so badly. Around the world, civil rights are better honored than ever before. Occasionally still we lynch someone, but it's not a normal thing to do. Capital punishment is disappearing from many countries. In other fields, we do much better than in the past. Women's rights are far better respected than ever before. There's still lots of problems. But at least in most countries, rape is no longer sanctioned within marriage. Children do a lot better. Just beating them up is no longer a normal thing to do in most countries around the world. Gays do a lot better. In many countries, the criminalization of homosexuality has disappeared from the law books. And even animals do a lot better. We have animal rights and welfare for animals. So we seem to be doing well. And wherever you look nowadays, there seems to be a global embrace of human rights. Everyone is happy about human rights. Even the largest corporations in the world, like Shell, are very happy about human rights. They're all celebrating human rights. So you would say, actually, it's clear. For our behavior in cyberspace, we use human rights. They're generally accepted around the world. End of story, and I can go home to Amsterdam. If it wasn't for some nasty questions. And the two nasty questions that I would like to raise with you is first, how, to use Clifford Christian's word, how authentic is our embrace of human rights? How honest is it? How genuine is it? Or is it only lip service? And secondly, when we talk about human rights, which human rights are we really talking about? Let me work that out a little bit. The genuine nature of our global embrace of human rights. One of the things that we need to realize that we are not the only moral animals on this planet. We share moral sentiments with our cousins. And our cousins, as you know, are the chimpanzees and the bonobos. Those two primates share with us moral features such as empathy, altruism, reconciliation, loyalty. They're just like us. They're like human beings. Like human beings, the chimpanzees and the bonobos make a clear differentiation between right and wrong, between good and evil. And they can feel guilt about evil doing. There is a problem, however, that we are, and maybe that's one of our failures, we are much smarter than our cousins. You see, we, the human animal, decided to begin to walk upright. We developed much larger brains than our cousins. We developed self-consciousness and we developed language. And that differentiates us from our cousins. In what way? Well, we became better communicators. The human species is by far the best communicator on this planet. But we had to pay a price for that because we are also the best liars. Our capacity for language and self-consciousness and our big brains made it terribly easy for us to lie. So we are the masters of deception, deceit, dishonesty, double talk. We are great at that. You can never trust us. You never know whether we say one thing and we mean something else. We talk about shared humanity in the human rights catalog. But we really found our own tribe much nicer than the other tribes. We always privilege our own tribe against the others. We like to talk about universality. In a very generous way, we use that concept. But if it really comes down to it, we hang on to the notion of the national state and national sovereignty. We like to talk in very glamorous ways about the rule of law. And in a country where people often talk about the rule of law, there are still people who were declared innocent, sitting for many years in prison. Guantanamo Bay people. Legally declared innocent, and yet we keep them imprisoned. And we talk easily in a cavalier manner about the rule of law. We are great at double talk. So whenever we say we embrace human rights, will have our conduct shaped and instructed by human rights, we better be careful. Secondly, what human rights are we really talking about? I like to make a distinction between what I would call weak human rights and strong human rights. Most human rights that we easily refer to are weak human rights. They come from a tradition in which we provide legal protection for individuals against institutions, particularly states as institutions. And we are concerned about the relations that develop between individuals and institutions. And when things go wrong in that relationship because people are unequally treated, we try to redress that. And it's good that we do that. That's not a minor issue. But it will never get us ahead, because what we don't do, and that is what strong human rights would do, we don't address the immorality of the institutions. We never look at the institutional root causes of inequality, for example, or indecency, or whatever it may be. We let the institutions easily off the hook. Now let me use a concrete case. Let's take the infamous case of Soldier Manning, who now stands trial and who may spend the rest of his life in prison for leaking documents. Now, in this weak human rights tradition, we would talk about his right to freedom of access to information, his free right to distribute information, and all these things. In strong human rights, we would raise a moral claim against an immoral institution. An immoral institution that wants to keep him in prison because of only one crime. He shared information with us that exposed Alatea, exposed in an authentic way the criminality of an important institution, his own government, covering up its violations of these basic commitments to humaneness and humanity. So strong human rights would look at institutions as root causes of human rights violations and try to redress that. Now, why is that so important? That is so important because the human being, and again, rather different from our cousins, the chimps and the bonobos, we institutionalize. Everything we do in life, we make institutions for. We translate our basic aspirations, our basic needs, our basic wants into institutions. We have a basic need for knowledge, so we build schools and universities. We have a basic need for health, so we build healthcare institutions, hospitals, medical practices. Probably inevitable. Probably that's the way we do things. And probably it's not institutionalization as such that's the problem, but it's the design of those institutions. Cyberspace is colonized by institutions, state institutions, interstate regulatory bodies, service providers, telecom companies, all institutions. We have institutionalized life in cyberspace. And why is that a problem? That's a problem because the design of those institutions is such that it stands in the way of honoring our commitment to humaneness and humanity. The design of our institutions is of an imperial nature. It's characterized, most institutions, with some exceptions, are characterized by empire building, by an obsession with competition, a drive to large scales. And of course, what we do in all our institutions, we follow the very successful formula of McDonald's. You know, the success of that fast food company is based on efficiency, calculability, predictability, and rationality. Just look around you. You'll find that most of our institutions, our universities, operate on principles of efficiency. Yes, we love you dearly as students, and we would want you to stay on, but please get out of the university. Don't hang on too long. You're much too expensive. We like our patients in hospitals, but we want to get rid of them as quickly as we possibly can, because we calculate that one night more in a bed is going to be expensive. So leave. Whether horizontally or vertically, we don't care, but leave the hospital, leave university. We want to get rid of you. We deal with all these issues in a rational, calculated way. That's the way our institutions operate. And I would like to call that type of institution an imperial institution. And also the institutions that run cyberspace are, by and large, that kind of institutions. Now, if we take our commitments to humaneness and humanity seriously, we need to address, from an ethics point of view, the institutions, the immorality of institutions that stand in the way of real learning. That's what most universities do. You like to believe that you go to a university and that you end up smarter than you were before, which is often not the case. You like to go into a hospital with the expectation that you get out healthy, which is often not the case. You like to enter cyberspace and hope that you will really humanely communicate, and you often find out that that's not the case. That's because of the way in which these institutions are designed. Now, unless we are courageous enough to address the immorality of institutions, I would propose that we leave morality to the chimpanzees and the bonobos. They'll do much better. But if we have the courage to address the institutional issue, we need to ask, how could we and how should we change these institutions? How would they become, possibly, institutions that meet our basic needs for communication, for education, for health? I would like to propose that that different type of institution would be called a convivial institution, contrary to an imperial institution. We need to convivialize our institutions. Now, conviviality is that nice English word which brings together, working together in a collegial ambiance and enjoying that as an element of joy and conviviality. You'll like it, you're having a good time. And in too many institutions, I don't see people having a good time. I walk around in many more universities than I care to remember, and I see often depressed faces, particularly among the lecturers who think it's a marvelous job, but they hate students. Same is the case in many hospitals. Doctors love their jobs, but oh God, the real problem is you've got patients. Pain in the neck. So, how do we convivialize our institutions? I was very happy that the chairwoman today introduced me as a jazz musician, because that's the metaphor I need. I need the metaphor of the jazz band as a form of social order in which people deal with each other in a convivial way. The jazz combos I've played with over so many years are characterized by, you like it to work together. You're creating together something really nice. And as you're doing that together and as you dialogue with each other, at the same time there's an enormous space for individual creativity, because you improvise all the time. You innovate. And whenever you make mistakes in the innovations, they don't matter. You learn from mistakes. In most of our institutions, make a real mistake as a student and you probably get punished for that. In the jazz band, you learn from the mistake. You do something creative with it. As the famous trumpet player Miles Davis once said, if there is no mistake, that's a mistake. And on top of that, what we do in jazz music, we don't believe in hierarchy. We change roles all the time. there's rotating leadership. And probably the most important to conclude with is, in jazz music, and that's what the convivial institution should do, we have accepted that living is a messy business. Most of our life, don't take this personally, but your life is a real mess, and your life is a real mess, and your life is a real mess. And that's good, that's the way it is. And we've got to accept that. The imperial institution wants to do away with the mess and wants to give us orders and instructions and lines of command to get rid of the mess. And then we get even deeper in the mess. So what we have to learn is to say jazz to the mess. And allow me at the end of this talk to wish you from the bottom of my heart really long and very messy lives. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. We will take questions for Professor Hamelink now. So if anyone would like to ask anything.
Or answers. I actually would rather have answers. Questioning is so, I have more questions than you all together. So if you have anything to offer, now please give me answers, now or in the break or later on.
No? Okay, so we may want to take some questions later. Okay. So next we have Professor John Mair, who is a former BBC producer. He's also chairman of the Institute of Communication Ethics, and he used to teach in Coventry. Now he's teaching in Northampton in the UK. Last year he wrote a book, The Phone Hacking Scandal. It is now in the second edition from last year. And 1 month ago he released his second book, After Leveson. So,
could somebody put this into? Right. Hello. I'll try and speak slowly because my natural temptation is to speak very fast. So if I'm speaking too fast, just wave at me and I'll slow down. Okay, we're going to talk about the British tabloid press, which is in deep trouble. Here they are, yesterday's papers. In the beginning was the News of the World, and it was there at the end as well. It was closed down by Rupert Murdoch a year and a half ago after 168 years. They were guilty of gross offence of public taste, and Murdoch didn't do it because of any moral decision. He did it because the advertisers abandoned the paper. From a story appearing in The Guardian on a Monday, the News of the World closed down on a Thursday because the advertisers decided that was not the paper they wanted to advertise in. What they'd done is they'd hacked the phone of a missing girl called Millie Dowler, and she was later found murdered. The Guardian said they'd hacked the phone and emptied the phone, but that probably isn't true. They'd hacked the phone, they'd gone into her phone and listened to her messages. And she was not alone. The News of the World engaged in an absolute orgy of phone hacking, usually at one remove. Anything up to 4,000 plus names were on the private investigator list, Glenn Mulcair's list. Scotland Yard say up to 820 victims, but in the last month they found another 500. So 1,300 victims of phone hacking. So slow down. Okay, let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the British tabloid press. They can be quite amusing. The good, they know their market and they know how to serve it. The tabloids, or as they're called in Britain, the red tops, are very popular. The Sun, the Mirror, and the Daily Star all sell close to 5 million copies daily. That's about 15 million people every day read them. Some headlines from the last few days. Some of them true, some of them false. They're the paper of choice for the British working class and white van man. They're irreverent, they have fun, and they hold power to account, whether politician, celebrity, or others, in 300 words or less. They can be very funny as well. A former Minister of Broadcasting, who was caught in a sexual liaison, went from toe job to no job, according to The Sun. And comedian Freddie Starr ate somebody's hamster. They can also be very, very cruel. You live or you die by the tabloids. Simon Cowell is a huge producer in Britain and is fodder for the tabloids, so his sex secrets are revealed, or not. The case of Katie Price, who's called Jordan in Britain, is somebody whose only asset is she has rather large breasts, and she's total tabloid fodder. She's lived her life through the tabloids. Footballers like John Terry live their life through the tabloids. But they can also be very good. This is the Daily Mail, which is a super tabloid, and they 4 years ago put this on their front page. These people were not convicted of murder. These were 5 people who the editor of the Daily Mail thought had murdered a young man called Stephen Lawrence, and they were right. They were later convicted of it, and the reason they put it on the front page was because the father of that boy had gone to decorate the house of the editor-in-chief, Paul Dacre. So they can be very good on things like that. So the Daily Mail, day after day after day, reflects the prejudices of suburban Britain. Every story usually has attached to it something about house prices, that Third World War breaks out, house prices not affected, or Third World War breaks out, house prices will be affected. Look at Madeleine McCann, who disappeared not very far away from here, nearly 6 years ago. Young girl. Her parents, Jerry and Kate, have run a media campaign to try to find her. And it's been pure tabloid fodder with speculation replacing fact and the truth going around the world and ending up on the front page of Daily Express in 10 minutes. They ran dozens of front pages about Madeleine McCann, dozens of them. Most of them were untrue. The McCanns were forced to sue for libel and settle for £500,000 plus in damages. The Express were very unlucky there. Others did the same, but they got away with it. Or Millie Dowler, who I mentioned at the beginning. Her parents were given false hope by the stories appearing in the tabloids based on her phone being hacked. The Sun said she was working in a factory in Leicester. She hadn't disappeared. In fact, she'd been murdered. Or this man. This man's a man called Chris Jeffries. He's the landlord of a girl who was murdered called Joanna Yates in Bristol in December 2010. Now, he was vilified and convicted by the tabloids. Do you know why? He had long grey hair and had been blue when he was a school teacher. So that was his only crime was he long grey hair, he was a landlord, and so he was a weirdo, and the tabloids felt he had murdered her. He hadn't. The police, in fact, arrested him as well. He took them to court, and he got a lot of money out of them, and he took them to the cleaners. So real people, real monstering by the Sun, and they use the term monstering, not me. The Mirror, they believe in raw prejudice against Muslims, against gypsies, against scroungers, against immigrants. You name it, and the minorities are there. In the words of Kelvin Mackenzie, one of the more famous tabloid editors, Essex is a county north of London. What he actually means was Essex, but we'll accept that. Now for the very ugly of our British tabloids. This is The Sun, the most popular tabloid. This is 25 years ago, on the Hillsborough disaster, when 96 Liverpool fans got crushed to death. The Sun told the truth. There we are. The truth is that they were all drunk, and they had it coming on them. The only trouble was they weren't drunk, and that wasn't true. And only last year did an official inquiry prove that was a lie. The Sun had to apologise, as did Kelvin Mackenzie, and sales in Liverpool have never recovered from that. Here we are, Max Mosley, the head of Formula One, or then head of Formula One, who indulged in an orgy with 4 or 5 hookers, and according to the News of the World, use Nazi words. You realise why that's important, because Max Mosley's father was Oswald Mosley, who was the British fascist leader in the 30s. In fact, it turns out that Mosley didn't use any fascist words. He did indulge in the orgy, he doesn't deny that. And do you know what? Max Mosley is now the major financier of the anti-tabloid campaign in Britain. He's a very rich man, and he pays for Hacked Off and various things like that. The victims of phone hacking range from Angela Jolie to Hugh Grant, who are stars, to politicians. David Blunkett and Charles Clark, who were the Home Secretary, they were security ministers. Their phones were hacked. And footballers like Rio Ferdinand and Ashley Cole, their phones were hacked. There was hardly anybody whose phone was not hacked. The News of the World was at the centre of all of this, and they employed a man called Glenn Trigger Mulcair. His previous job, he was a footballer. Ironic, eh? He made a total art out of phone hacking. And if you want to know how to phone hack, it's very easy. You get two phones, you get somebody's security code, you ring one phone, ring the other one, and put in the security code, and that's it. You can listen to all their messages. He made, in 1 year, £115,000 in fees from the News and Screws, as it's called in Britain. £115,000 in fees from that one newspaper. In 2007, he was jailed with the one rogue reporter, as News International would have us believe, the royal editor called Clive Goodman, when they were found intercepting the phones of Prince William and others. So one rogue reporter, one rogue Glenn Mulcair. But that one rogue reporter has since become 2 or 3 or 4 rogue newsrooms. The Sun, the Mirror and the Star added in, so the entire newsrooms were rogue. Goodman has been charged again in 2012, and phone hacking for much of the last 10 years has been the journalistic tool of choice. Why bother to actually go and talk to people? Why bother to investigate when you can hack their phones? It's so easy. Just hack their phones and find out what they're up to. Blagging as well. Blagging is a very strange British term. To blag means to lie, to impersonate. So I could blag that I'm Spanish here by talking Spanish. So journalists indulge in blagging. They employed private detectives, and in fact in one case they gave him a journalist card to go and blag details of various people. So they blagged bank details, medical details, everything like that. They blagged it. They just rang up the bank and said, I'm Fred Bloggs, a few security questions, and they got all the answers. Britain's Information Commissioner found thousands of cases. This is back in 2003. And one private detective had been employed by 305 national newspaper reporters. That's one detective, 305 national newspaper reporters. There aren't more than 1,000 national newspaper reporters, so 1 in 3 was using that private detective. Plus the thing called monstering, which is where they decide on a target and then they pick them apart like the legs from a fly. These are just some of the dark arts of the New Fleet Street. So Essex is a county north of London. It's not something that exists in Fleet Street. But then along came this man, Lord Leveson. Lord Justice Leveson was appointed by David Cameron after the Millie Dowler scandal, within 2 weeks. And he was set out a judicial inquiry into the culture, ethics and practice of the British press. Sir Brian, he had evidence of 609 witnesses, 3 million plus words of evidence under oath, 16 months. These are all under oath. This man is a senior judge. The great and the good and the not so great and good of British journalism and public life appeared in his doc, from David Cameron and Rupert Murdoch downwards. Anybody with any interest in modern journalistic ethics, just go to the Leveson Inquiry website and read the raw evidence. It's all there. It's all there. It's on video, in text. It will make your hair stand on end. It did mine. Modern tabloid woman and the editors can't even spell the word ethics. One proprietor was asked to define the word ethics, and he couldn't. He flumbled for about a few minutes. So at the end of it all, after 16 months, Lord Leveson produced a report, a proper, reasoned report, 2,000 pages of it. And he said nothing since, so that's his Leveson. So I'm going to summarize his report for you in 140 words or less. This is what he said. Elements of the British press have acted very badly. They wreaked havoc and they're out of control. Self-regulation of the press, in Brian Leveson's memorable phrase, marking their own homework, had failed dismally. So he proposed a much firmer self-regulation body with outsiders on it and the power to investigate and fine heavily. The self-regulators had investigated phone hacking in 2009 and found nothing. And secondly, he suggested they underpinned it by a tiny dab of statute, a bit of law, to ensure the press did not roll back on the commitments. So there we are, that's 2,000 pages and 70 words. So what have we got now? What we've got now is the second part has passed through Parliament through a thing called a Royal Charter. It's just like the BBC has and every British university has. They have a Royal Charter which gives them the right to exist. The editors and publishers, though, are sitting on their hands and refusing to accept it. So the first part is stalled. They can't continue forever. The editors and proprietors are saying this is a threat to freedom as we know it. They're producing pictures of Mugabe, Stalin, and various others, and saying this is Stalinism, Mugabeism. They're talking rubbish. Now, you think, well, these people ought to be doing something illegal. Well, they were. They were doing a lot illegal. Tapping phones is not legal, nor is blagging legal, nor is quite a lot happening. So been 4 big police investigations. First of all, the Metropolitan Police, the London Police, the National Police, they discovered the art of investigation. In 2009, Assistant Commissioner John Yates had announced to Parliament that, and I'm quoting him, no additional evidence had come to light. He ignored the 9 bin bags of evidence in the corner of his office and carried on. John Yates now works in Bahrain, advising the government on policing and human rights. Some people say he's welcome to be there. So now 3 ongoing police investigations into phone hacking in England and 1 in Scotland. And there have been arrests, charges and convictions. It's Beano time. Operation Wheatin, which is 1 into phone hacking and News of the World and elsewhere. So far, 36 arrested, 27 of them journalists, 21 former News of the World journalists, and much of the editorial high command of that paper for the last decade. 16 have been charged, some with a very serious offence of an attempt to pervert the course of justice. Nobody's yet come before the courts. Amongst those charged is Rebecca Brooks, who was the CEO of News International, who's been charged with conspiracy, and Andy Coulson, the Prime Minister's former press secretary, who has also been charged with conspiracy and phone hacking. So that's the phone hacking investigation. Secondly, an operation called Elvedon. That's about corrupt payments by journalists to public officials like police and prison officers in return for information. Sums of up to £80,000 were mentioned by a very senior policewoman in her evidence to Leveson. Now, much of the information from these arrests have come to be supplied by News International, Rupert Murdoch's company itself, through a trawl of 300 million staff emails. There have been 52 arrests so far. Half of the current news desk of this paper here. So half of the journalists working in this paper have been arrested. Nobody's in charge yet, but 22 of them have been arrested. And 4 convictions to date. And all of those convictions, sadly, have been people who've offered information rather than people who've received information. The reason why Rupert Murdoch's company decided to hand these people into the police was for American stock market reasons, because they wanted to be seen as a clean company. So they established a management services group which went through all the emails, and anybody who had been found to be corrupting policemen or prison officers was handed over to the police by their own employer. Interesting. Now, the sad thing about Elvedon is it's very chilling, because it means that policemen, prison officers and so on will no longer talk to journalists. So that is a very bad side effect. There's a third operation called Talita, which is into hacking in computers. And 18 arrested so far, 7 of them journalists. And finally, the Scottish police have an operation called Rubicon, which is what David Cameron said he wouldn't cross in terms of any legislation as a result of Leveson. And that's about perjury in a trial about perjury. And so far, 3 arrests. The Prime Minister's former press secretary, Andy Coulson, and the former editor of the Scottish Sun and the Scottish News of the World. So, British tabloid journalism is not in a good state. People will go to jail in the next 2 years. They could, and they probably should, include some very serious players in British journalism, like Coulson, a former editor of News of the World, and like Rebecca Brooks, a former Sun and News of the World editor, and Cameron's most prominent bullhorn in the press. The interesting thing about all the people who rose in News International is they came out of celebrity journalism. They came out of columns like Bizarre and so on, which are tittle-tattle about celebrities. So they probably came out of a career built on phone hacking. So will this all change the British tabloid press? Will they discover new ethics? Will they be reformed people? I doubt it, because part of their DNA is breaking the rules and laws, and in their own words, they're having a laugh. They use the phrase, "You're having a laugh, aren't you?" I'm going to now show you a video out today by a former tabloid journalist called Richard Pepiat, who every week produces a thing called Spike, which looks in a light-hearted way at the tabloid press. And believe me, they hate him. Let's see if we can find it. Here we go.
Hello, my name's Rich Pepiat and welcome to The Spike, where each episode I'll be raiding the savings of the Cypriot Bank of News. Monday was April Fool's Day, when tradition dictates our press pull a little prank on their readers. The Sun pretended that goalposts in the Capital One Cup were going to be made twice as wide. The Mirror pretended that Virgin Airlines were going to introduce glass-bottom planes. Look at that, ain't that brilliant? And the Telegraph claimed that Sir Cameron Mackintosh was teaming up with German composer Olaf Dili-Palos to write a musical about the coalition government. They do know how to have a good laugh over at the Telegraph. The Daily Mail had a rather bemusing scoop to kick off the Easter weekend. Cameron accused of betraying Christians. I'm no theologian, but I'm pretty sure that that's Judas Iscariot. Oh no, stand corrected. The tragic mauling to death of Jade Anderson dominated last week's front pages. A little word of advice for the Metro: perhaps best not to use the same page to advertise the return of Sky drama Mad Dogs. Creepiest front page of the week has got to go to the Sun. I dread my kids calling me Holly Willoughby. But why? That's their mum. It's weird, incestuous. Ugh. If that was my mum, she'd be very unhappy. She prefers sugar tits. But the Sun had a real boob fixation this week. Cleavage nightclub is busted.
Oh no.
I know, don't shoot the messenger. This is the story that to celebrate National Cleavage Week, a nightclub in Kent was offering free entry to any women displaying their décolletage. The Sun, predictably, was at the scene. The promotional flyer for the National Cleavage Weekender has several photos of women bursting out of their bras and tight-fitting dresses. Sharon Abbywell, 42, said this is degrading. The thought of getting free entry for exposing your breasts to save £3 is disgraceful. Quite right too. In the modern age, National Cleavage Week is not something to be celebrated. Reducing women to a sum of their vital statistics, that should be a bloody competition. And they still managed to squeeze in revealing pictures of the runners-up, all 30 of them. If the lifeblood of the Sun could be said to be tits and outrage, any opportunity to combine the two is breast milk from the gods. Enter Josie Cunningham. A mum of two got a breast enlargement on the NHS after telling doctors, "I could never go on holiday as I lived in terror of ever being seen in a bikini and could never set foot outside without a padded bra." To be fair to the Sun, they did write a soul-searching editorial admitting they may be partly to blame for promoting a double D female ideal capable of wrecking the self-esteem of women like Josie. Nah, they didn't. Gave her a very own topless photo shoot. Another week, another piss-poor hatchet job against press reform campaign group Hacked Off, or as the Daily Mail like to call them, quasi-Masonic nexus of the people who know best. I wanted my family to get me a quasi-Masonic nexus for Christmas, but Sugar Tits said I had to wait until it came out on pay-as-you-go. Sunday's Telegraph saw Andrew Gilligan become the latest press stormtrooper to take a swing at Hacked Off, alleging they are attempting to claim the country for the authoritarian left and forcing the press to serve defined social and political objectives. Of course, Gilligan would know a thing or two about defined political objectives, having worked as chief mayoral cheerleader at Boris Johnson fanzine, the Evening Standard. Not that he works there anymore. Now he works for Boris Johnson. Much of the press is getting so desperate to discredit Hacked Off, they resorted to one of the foulest and most despicable of smears imaginable, claiming, wrongly, that Hacked Off accepted money from Jeremy Clarkson. This was meant to force Hacked Off to betray the identities of their actual donors, many of whom understandably don't want to end up like Hugh Grant with a pig's snout photoshopped on his face. To be fair, he does pull it off sickeningly well. But Hacked Off believe that when you promise to protect a source, you should do so unconditionally, unlike News International, who in the past year have turned over more sources than a Heinz factory. So, memo to Andrew Gilligan. The reason you lost the press reform debate isn't Hacked Off or vengeful MPs or some leftist conspiracy. It's that when you, the press, were given the opportunity to make your case at Leveson, you went and did this.
Clearly there have been failings in journalistic practices.
Actually, I've got a bucket of shit on my desk, Prime Minister, and I'm going to pour it all over you.
Why did you do it then?
I was told to.
I cannot remember the specifics of the story.
I can't remember. Did it carry I don't remember.
I just can't remember whether I brought it up or not.
Apart from it being a business opportunity, but is there anything else which attracted you to the idea of being a newspaper proprietor?
No.
When he said he was drunk all the time he was at the Sun, which we didn't notice.
Did you have any particular or any regard to issues such as privacy?
Not really, no.
Privacy is for pedos.
I'm not arguing the toss with you on that.
Ethical, I can't know what the word means, but perhaps you'd explain what the word means, ethical.
It doesn't necessarily follow that listening to somebody speaking to somebody else is unethical.
Right, plug the book at the end. That came out today. That's Richard Pepiat, who was a tabloid journalist, who's turned against the tabloids in a very, very funny way. And what you saw there at the end were proprietors and editors, including Murdoch, appearing in front of Lord Leveson. It was it was unfairly edited, but even so, it's all there. So there we are. The British press, ethics, the tabloid press. I'm afraid they don't know what it is. Over to questions from you.
Yes, I'd like to thank both our two speakers for their very interesting contributions, and we'll take questions for both Cees and John.
Happy to answer anybody.
Thank you both.
It's not switched on, I don't think.
Mm-mm. Hi. Is it on? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Those were both very interesting presentations. Cees Hamelink, you spoke about reforming or changing the nature of the institution, the ethics of the institution, rather than individuals' ethics. So my question for both of you is, and in light of John Mair's presentation now, is the institution journalism or is the institution tabloid journalism?
The institution is British tabloid journalism, which has actually gone way beyond the pale. It crossed its own Rubicon many, many years ago, and it will have to come back from that crossing. If that's by law or by public demand, I don't know. But certainly there is public support for some form of light touch regulation of the British tabloid press to stop intrusions of privacy and to stop some of the excesses of it, and certainly to stop the illegal behaviour that has gone on.
I would dearly wish it was only British tabloid journalism. I think it's a much more critical issue because increasingly around the world, like for example in my own country, the Netherlands, where we used to have quality newspapers, they increasingly operate like tabloid newspapers because they need to make money. They are under the pressure of the kinds of institution they are and the way in which institutions need to make money. They need to sell hamburgers like McDonald's. I think that's the core of the problem. It's easy to blame the individuals, but I know that in many countries around the world, within newspapers and within broadcast stations, there's an enormous amount of talent, often young people, who would really like to do much better than they presently do, and who also could do a lot better. I mean, and the same is true, by the way, not only in the news business, it's also true in the film industry, where you find very talented young producers who would really be capable of making much more interesting materials and much more. How many journalists wouldn't really dream of becoming a real investigative reporter? That's still, isn't that the dream of any young man and woman going into journalism, that you become a muckraking journalist, that you expose Watergate scandals and related scandals? So there's nothing wrong with their ambition, but only to find out that the institution will limit them in doing that. And that increasingly, because the institution is dependent upon income from advertisers or has all kinds of pressures on it, or increasingly the institution is not supported by, we were talking just an hour ago, and how far in a country like Mexico, young people are deterred and discouraged from going into journalism because they see almost, well, weekly the journalists being killed for attacking the institutions. So I mean, it's not a healthy profession to go into. And it's, again, institutions which stand in the way. It's governments, like in the case of Mexico, that see no use in exposing. I'm all in favor of what Clifford Christians was saying this morning, aletheia and authentic exposure. But, but in many countries, if you do that, you get killed. And you get killed by institutions and by the way in which they operate. And I think we need to bring that, as I said before, to the fore. We need to expose that, and we need to discuss that. And let's see whether we can change that. If we can't, I think it's the end of the exercise.
It's interesting or not that the major phone hacking newspapers were both Rupert Murdoch papers, and there is an argument. Rupert Murdoch, who owns something like 35% of the British press, has taken the British press down into an alleyway that it shouldn't have gone down, which maybe isn't as clean as it should be, and maybe does the same in America. But the Murdoch press have a lot to answer for.
Okay, we have time for many more questions. Any other questions?
Go, ask again.
Is there a question there? Do you have a question there? Yeah? Okay. We have to.
It seems we've focused quite a bit on institutions themselves, but aren't institutions shaped by the people who consume the information that they put out? And what role is there for individuals influencing this? I mean, the comment was that institutions kill or result in journalists maybe dying if they have, say, exposed the truth about some serious violation. But isn't there individual agency here? Is it all just the responsibility of institutions in reforming those things?
The tabloids know their market. They know who they're appealing to. And 5 million people buy the tabloids every day. 10 million read it. So they firmly know their market. White van man, as he's called in Britain, loves celebrity tittle-tattle, loves all of that. So yes, there is agency in it, and the agency is people who are buying it. And why are they buying it? Because that's what they know and what they like, unfortunately.
Many, many years ago, after the first war in the Gulf, some people decided that we should have an international media consumers union, a critical movement that would say enough is enough. We've been lied to by CNN and colleagues during that war, and we don't take this any longer. And we, a group of media activists, established what was called the People's Communication Charter. The idea was that citizens themselves would take responsibility, indeed, against the institution. Because I think in the end, it's only, indeed, the citizens that can make a difference. But as long as they don't care, So we began that People's Communication Charter, and it's a bit anecdotal, but the first meeting that I had about that was with the then boss of CNN. And the interesting thing was that he said, we are a business, just like Murdoch is a business. And as long as millions of people around the world like what we do, why would we change that? So he looked at us and he said, it's your task to convert those millions, not to want any longer stuff that I produce. If you get 1 million signatures under a document that says what CNN does is rubbish, we want to have better news, then I'm quite willing to think seriously about that. Well, we began the campaign and we never got beyond 500,000 signatures, which is something, but of course, the problem was that time and time again, whenever we worked on that action and when we talked to individuals about their media consumption and asking them to be critical, it turned out that McLuhan was absolutely right when he once said, people don't think about the media just like fish don't think about the water in which they swim. They take it for granted. There's no reason for them to get worried. And my riddle still is, and again, I'm going to ask for answers and not for questions. My riddle is, why is it that increasingly around the world we become critical consumers? If our vacuum cleaner or our television set doesn't work, we know how to act. We know how to redress that. But if we get damaging information and if we get misleading information day after day thrown at us, we don't seem to find that important enough to act. We never complain. At least most of us never complain. I think unless we can begin to change that. And of course, in some countries, people try to begin to change that by introducing in school curricula a topic which was called media education, which I think is a good beginning. But then, of course, when crisis began to hit educational systems around the world, one of the first topics that went out of the window was media education. We didn't think it was important enough.
It's interesting that the most popular English language website in the world, which is the Daily Mail Online, which has, I think, 133 million downloads a month, that is predicated on what's called the sidebar of shame. If you look at the site, down the right-hand side, they're essentially tabloid stories about celebrities and usually pictures of them, and usually pictures of their kids and all things that break all the rules, and up the skirt shots, the whole lot. That is, nobody ever got poor underestimating the taste of the world public, I'm afraid.
We had another question there.
Sorry, it wasn't a question, it was really just a comment, or maybe in response to you, John McNair. My question was, isn't it then easy just to scapegoat the British tabloid press? And we kind of think we've addressed the bigger problems about being critical consumers of the media in general.
Are you saying there's no need to scapegoat the British tabloid? Well, they've been caught. Others haven't. I mean, they've been caught well and truly, with their pants down in lots of ways. Lord Leveson, I implore you to read the evidence to Lord Leveson. 16 months of people saying, I can't remember, I don't know, prophecies for paedophiles. These are tabloid journalists, tabloid editors. So, and they've been caught phone hacking. Who knows who else phone hacks? They were only caught because of a good bit of investigative journalism by The Guardian, which pursued them over 4 or 5 years, despite the police saying there was nothing to find out, the Press Complaints Commission saying there was nothing to find out. The Guardian just dug and dug and dug away, and they were right. So they were unlucky. I mean, I don't know what the Spanish tabloid press is like and what their methods are. I would hope nothing as bad.
Okay, do we have more questions? Or comments? No? I'd like to use my chair privilege, if possible. we're talking about change and changing institutions, and mainly talking about the UK context. Recently, it's been all about the Leveson inquiry, what to do next, and this idea of legislating, or perhaps, as David Cameron says, perhaps using a royal charter. I remember The Independent published this front page after Leveson gave his conclusions, and David Cameron rejected his conclusions, and the front page was tomorrow's fish and chips paper. Okay, the Leveson inquiry was tomorrow's fish and chips paper. Is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, 2,000 words of well-argued prose is absolutely not fish and chip paper. In fact, David Cameron's now changed his position. David Cameron now accepts there should be a little bit of legislation. He did that because he decided to take on the opposition, and he was going to lose in Parliament. He was simply going to lose, so he had to change his position. He abandoned the talks on it, and he said, I'm going to have a vote on Monday. Then when he counted it up, the Labour and Lib Dems were going to outvote him, so suddenly he changed his position. So David Cameron, it won't be fish and chip paper. In fact, there have been 6 royal commissions into the British press since 1945, 6. None of them have actually resulted in any change of real significance. I think Leveson might, because finally I think there's a public mood that actually this time you guys have gone too far. And you can't, as an editor or a proprietor, claim to be outside the law, which is what some of them are claiming. We don't want the law to apply to us. Well, actually, if that happened with doctors or with teachers or anybody else, the Daily Mail and the Sun would be all over their front pages. These people don't want the law to apply to them. You know, they have, whether they like it or not, the law is the law of the land, and it's made by Parliament, not by papers. And I remind you of a quote, I think, from Stanley Baldwin 70 years ago. He said, what the press want is power without responsibility, the prerogative of the harlot throughout the years.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, it's very easy at a conference like this, though, to be to look down on the tabloids and think we're much better than them. But you have to realise they do serve an audience. They serve an audience, and by and large, they serve it very well. So, we mustn't all be Guardian readers and look down our noses at them, because they most of the time they're doing a good job. But it's when they stray too far that they need slapping or the law.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so thank you, everyone, and I think we'll call it here. So thank you very much. Can I take another applause for our speakers today? Thank you. Again.
I'm happy to give away copies of the British tabloids if anyone wants them, by the way, and flogging copies of my book.